welcome back to Teen Story Share. This week we're going to be reading our last chapter of Into the Heartless Wood by Joanna Ruth Meyer. And next week, which is a new month already, we'll be starting a new book. So, I will put the links down below as usual for the previous chapters that we read from this in case you need to catch up. Chapter 7, Owen. The day we lost our mother was Abuela's first birthday. There were cake crumbs scattered on the floor beneath the kitchen table. Mother tucked Abuela into her crib after lunch and took her cello outside into the garden, where she liked to play for the birds and record music on wax cylinders for her phonograph. She composed her own music, but that's not how she explained it. She said she played the songs her heart taught her, or the wind whispered into her ears. I wondered sometimes if she played the songs of the Wood Witch's daughters too, but I never asked her that. Perhaps I should have. I liked hearing Mother play. I played some too. She'd given me my first lessons when I was so small the cello dwarfed me, my hand barely big enough to wrap around the bow. I enjoyed playing, but I'd never be as good as her. Her whole soul was filled with music, mine brimmed with stars. That day, I was up in my room reading one of my father's scientific journals about a telescope being built in sight that would be powerful enough to look deeper into space than ever before. My mother's music drifted up from the garden. She stopped playing suddenly in the middle of a phrase. It was strange enough that I glanced out the window in time to see her drop her cello into the cabbages, to stride with purpose toward the Gwithin's wood. "Mother!" I cried, flinging the journal onto my bed and bolting downstairs. Alerted by my shout, Father joined me on the stairs, and the two of us burst outside just as the hem of my mother's dress vanished among the trees. "Era!" my father cried. He ran in after her. Father, wait! Stay with Abuela," he called back to me. "Keep her safe." And then the forest swallowed him too. I paced in front of the house, more shocked than frightened. I trusted my father to bring my mother back. I didn't fear the Gwithin then, not any more than a child fears a monster from a story. But when Abuela woke and there was still no sign of either of our parents, I was afraid. And when the sun set and clouds rolled in and Abuela cried for her dinner and they hadn't come back, dread gripped me in its lion's jaws. I fed Abuela leftover birthday cake and lumpy porridge, because it was the only thing I knew how to cook. I ran outside to save Mother's cello when it started to rain. I shoveled coal into the stove when the early spring night grew swiftly cold. I put Abuela to bed, trying to remember all the songs my mother usually sang to her. I swept the cake crumbs off the floor. And then I collapsed in front of the fire and wondered if I was an orphan. I must have dozed because when the door banged open sometime during the night, I jerked awake to find my father stumbling into the house. He looked like he had been to hell and back again. His clothes ragged and torn, dried blood caking both arms, his neck and face covered in scratches. There were leaves caught in his dark hair. "Father?" I whispered. He collapsed onto the floor and wept, his whole body shaking. "She's gone," he choked out over and over. "She's gone." The next day, he started building the wall, working feverishly from sunrise to sunset, hardly sleeping, hardly eating. He worked until his hands were scraped raw, until his skin was gray with mortar. He didn't stop until he'd finished it, a mile long and 5 feet high. It was meant to protect us from the Gwithin, but I saw what it really was, a memorial to my mother. The evidence of my father's guilt and shame, because if he'd built it earlier, like he'd always meant to, he might not have lost her at all. I never asked him what he saw in the Gwithin's wood, how he managed to escape, if he'd found my mother, if he'd seen the Gwithin or her daughters. A part of me had always wanted to believe that my mother was alive, that she'd escaped somehow. Now I have no such illusions. My father saved me, but he couldn't save her. Father stays home with Abuela and me the rest of the day and all the next. I'm glad he's here. I don't know how to give Abuela the attention she needs when my head is splitting apart, trying to forget yellow eyes and silver-white skin, trying to block out the screams of the train passengers, the snap of their bones, the tree siren's song pinning me helpless to the ground. At least in the light of day there's the garden to weed, and the meals to cook, and the futile task of attempting to keep Abuela out of mischief. When night falls, there are the stars to chart with my father, a pot of cinnamon tea to drain down to dregs. But after that, when I crawl into bed and try to sleep, there's nothing to keep that day in the wood from playing itself over and over behind my eyes, an endless parade of blood and leaves ringed with a violet flower crown. It is impossible to distinguish the moment my thoughts morph into nightmares, for my sleep is the same as my waking, yellow eyes and silver skin, blood dripping red onto the ground. But in my dreams, the tree siren doesn't let me go. In my dreams, she never stops singing, not even when she rips my heart from my body, not even when she breaks all my bones and leaves me gasping up at the wheeling sky, the lifeblood pouring out of me. Even in death, I hear her song. She kills me again and again, her teeth sinking into my throat, her branches impaling my chest. I drown in dirt and leaves and blood. I wake up screaming, my heart racing like a wild hare, my body slick with sweat. I don't try to go back to sleep. I pull on a robe and climb up to the observatory, opening the dome and adjusting the telescope. I take comfort in the planets and stars, in telling myself the old stories of the constellations. Astronomers speculate that the constellations as we see them now didn't always look the same, that they have shifted little by little over time. In a few thousand years, I might not even recognize the Twisog Melanig, the spiteful prince, or the Morwen, the maiden. Maybe future astronomers will rename these constellations, create new myths to go with them, but I can't imagine the spiteful prince being anything other than the thief who betrayed the Morwen and stole her crown. He escaped up into the heavens, where he made himself into a constellation to hide from her. She wasn't deceived. She followed him there, and now every year she chases him around the ecliptic, stretching out her hand for the crown, never quite catching it. Nonsense, of course, but it was one of my mother's favorite stories. It hurts to think of her. I shift the telescope to a different part of the sky, and doze off in the chair, trying to forget anything ever existed apart from the stars. Father goes back to his work at Brennan's farm, and I go back to minding Abuela in the house every day, trying to regather the pieces of myself that fractured apart in the Gwithin's wood. It's hard. It's so hard. And try as I might, I can't quite fall back into the rhythm of it. I'm restless and uneasy, my eyes traveling always to the trees over Father's wall. They hang lower with every passing day, trailing leaves rattling over the stone. It feels as if the wood is watching me, waiting. I don't trust it, and I don't trust myself around it. So, as much as is humanly possible, I try to keep Abuela indoors. Her response is to learn how to unlatch the door and let herself out, and after that I do take her outside, so I'll at least always know where she is. Because I don't trust Father's wall either. Spring deepens into summer, and Abuela helps me pick the first batches of strawberries from our garden. Most of the ones she picks don't make it into her basket, and she's soon covered in sticky red juice. I wash her with water from the pump, and she laughs and wriggles and screams as I scrub her clean. "Come inside, little one. Time for lunch," I tell her. "Want stay side," my sister wails. And I can't quite deny her, so I make a picnic for us, and we eat on the blanket in full view of the warm sun. A cool breeze curls out from the wood and over the wall, smelling of earth and growth and that acrid scent of dead things. I push away the memory of yellow eyes and blood dripping from silver skin. Exhaustion weighs on me. Nightmares chased me to the observatory again last night, as they have every night since my father rescued me, and Abuela woke earlier than usual. She eats half her lamb and potato pasty and licks the gravy from her fingers, then clamors for her milk. I lounge on the blanket as she leans against my chest as she drinks, curling her small body into the hollow of my shoulder. The trees whisper and the bees hum in the garden. The blanket is soft beneath my cheek. My eyelids drift shut. For the first time in weeks, I sleep deeply, dreamless. Some part of me is certain Abuela hasn't left the shelter of my arm, that she has fallen asleep too. But when I wake with a start, the afternoon is half gone, and I am alone. Abuela's bottle empty and abandoned beside me. For a moment, I don't understand the sudden, paralyzing fear that seizes me. Then I raise my eyes and see the hole in Father's wall. No, no, this isn't real. I'm dreaming. I jerk upright and bolt to the wall. The ground bulges with the lump of a tree root. With the tumbled stones it shifted as it grew, somehow, in the short time I was sleeping. The hole is big enough for a child to squeeze through. A child wearing a dress the same color blue as the scrap of torn cloth caught on the jagged edge of one of the stones. The trees rustle eerily, though there's no wind. I can't breathe. This is a dream. But I drag my finger along the broken stone and suck in a breath at the prick of pain, at the blood beating up. Something else catches my eye just beyond the wall, incongruous with the undergrowth. It's one of Abuela's shoes, scuffed brown leather, the strap undone. I shimmy over the wall and drop down on the other side and snatch it up. I'm in one of my nightmares. This can't be real. This is a dream. But it's not. Oh, it's not. I'm shaking hard. I can't stop. Please, I plead, please let this be a dream. I can't go back in there. I can't. The trees whisper around me. The ground undulates with more hidden roots, moving like living creatures under the earth. Terror suffocates me, paralyzes me. But I can't let my sister be swallowed by the wood. I won't. I will find her, save her like my father saved me. And then all three of us will go away from here. Far, far away. We'll never come back. I'm still shaking as I shove Abuela's shoe into my pocket and step under the trees. Alright, thanks for joining us for Teen Story Share. I hope you have a great weekend, and I'll see you again next Friday with a new book.